Welcome to the Architect of Sleep channel. Today we will journey to the bottom of the North Atlantic, to the silent kingdom where a legend sleeps, the sunken Titanic. We will not recall the roar and screams of that icy night. Instead, we will immerse ourselves in absolute silence, at a depth of almost 4 kilometers, to see what the most famous ship in the world has become. It is no longer a symbol of tragedy, but a silent monument, slowly dissolving in the ocean's embrace, having become a home for spectral life. This is a lullaby of rust, time, and eternal peace. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. And now, just breathe. Let your eyes grow heavy and your mind soften. Let's begin. Imagine a world where you are pressed not by the fatigue of the day, but by the weight of an entire ocean. At a depth of 3,800 meters, where the Titanic rests, the pressure reaches almost 400 atmospheres, compressing everything with a force equal to the weight of several cars on the area of a postage stamp. This pressure is an invisible yet omnipotent sculptor. It crushed the stern section of the ship into an unrecognizable mass of metal during its descent, and continues to slowly press the decks into one another, compacting history. Any air bubble trapped inside has long since been compressed to a microscopic volume, giving way to the all-pervading water. It is a titanic embrace in which steel learns humility and submission. In this realm of monstrous pressure, an almost absolute primordial darkness reigns. Sunlight cannot penetrate the water column deeper than a few hundred meters, and so here, at the bottom, an eternal midnight reigns, one that will never be replaced by dawn. This is not just the absence of light, but its complete, original non-existence, dense and heavy like velvet. The only flashes in this gloom are the cold, ghostly glow of bioluminescent creatures, or the rare beam of a research submersible, snatching a fragment of the ship from oblivion for a few moments, before surrendering it to the darkness once more. The Titanic sleeps in a cradle of pure darkness. As it was before the creation of the stars, this gloom is filled not only with pressure, but also with a piercing, eternal cold. The water temperature at such a depth barely exceeds freezing, hovering steadily around 1 degree Celsius. This icy calm is a great preserver, slowing all processes 1,000-fold, from the metabolism of bacteria to chemical reactions. It slows corrosion, allowing the ship to retain its shape for so long, as if time here flows more slowly, viscous and reluctant. If not for this cold, the Titanic would have long since been reduced to just a pile of rust dust. It is as if it has encased the giant in an invisible drop of amber, frozen between a moment and eternity. In this amber drop of time, an almost physically palpable silence reigns. There is no sound of waves, wind, or rain here, only the low-frequency, barely perceptible hum of the planet itself, and the rare, quiet clicks of deep-sea creatures. Sound travels differently in the dense water. It becomes thick, viscous, and the silence here seems not an emptiness, but a presence, a heavy velvet blanket. Any sound made by a submersible seems like sacrilege here, a harsh intrusion into a world that has heard nothing louder than the whisper of currents for over 100 years. This silence is the main guardian of the sunken ship's peace, its final lullaby. This lullaby sounds over 2 Titanic tombstones, separated by almost a kilometer of silence. The great ship rests on the ocean floor, not as a single whole, but as two enormous fragments of a single soul, testaments to the monstrous agony of the breakup. The bow section, relatively intact, plunged into the seabed with immense force, preserving its proud and recognizable outlines. The stern, however, falling and rotating through the water column, was torn apart by pressure and internal explosions, turning into a mangled, chaotic mass of metal. Between them lies a quiet field of debris, like an ellipsis in the ship's final sentence. This ellipsis is written not in ink but in rust, and not an ordinary kind, but a living one. From the ship's hull and superstructures hang fragile orange-brown icicles, resembling stalactites in a cave of time. These are rusticles, complex ecosystems created by colonies of bacteria and fungi that literally feed on the iron of the hull. They are the architects of decay, slowly but inexorably turning the strongest steel into a friable oxide. Every centimetre of such a formation represents years of tireless work by microscopic life, digesting the heritage of the industrial age. The ship is not just rusting, it is being methodically eaten. The process of this consumption led to the discovery of a whole new world of microbes. Among these living stalactites, a bacterium previously unknown to science was discovered, which was named Halomonas titanici. This microorganism is ideally adapted to life in extreme conditions: high pressure, low temperature, and salt water. It is this organism that plays a key role in the formation of rusticles and the acceleration of corrosion. Titanic did not just become a home for existing species, it served as a cradle for the evolution of new, unique life forms. The greatest creation of man became a petri dish for nature. Nature also uses other tools of destruction. Powerful deep-sea currents, invisible rivers on the ocean floor, constantly wash over the Titanic's hull. They carry with them the finest particles of sand and silt, which act like endless sandpaper, slowly but surely abrading the metal's surface and carrying away particles of rust. These currents, known as benthic storms, can be strong enough to move small pieces of debris and shape the topography of the seabed around the ship, creating sand dunes along its sides. The ocean did not just sink the giant, it is actively sanding it down, grain by grain. These sands of time expose the ship's scars, left not only by the ocean. Along the starboard side of the bow section, the damage from the collision with the iceberg is still visible. It is not one large gash, as was long believed, but a series of dents, tears, and weakened rivets spanning nearly 100 meters. The steel plates in this area are bent inward, as if a giant fingernail had scraped a groove along the hull plating. Water flooded into 6 of the forward compartments, and it was this chain reaction that sealed the fate of the unsinkable liner. This fatal wound is now covered over with rust, like an old, deep scar. This scar is a reminder of the Titan's hidden brittleness. Studies of hull fragments recovered from the seabed showed that the Titanic should steel, while meeting the standards of its time, became brittle in the icy water of the North Atlantic. On impact with the iceberg, it did not bend but shattered like glass. This was not a defect or an engineering error, but simply a feature of the metallurgy of that era, when sulfur impurities made the metal vulnerable to the cold. The ship was incredibly strong, yet at the same time vulnerable to the cold. Its Achilles heel turned out to be the cold itself, which now paradoxically preserves its remains. It also preserves evidence of how this steel disintegrated. The Titanic's hull was held together by more than 3 million rivets. During the sinking and impact with the seabed, colossal stresses caused the rivets to pop like buttons on a tight waistcoat, with a deafening sound like machine gun fire. Now, looking at the torn-off sheets of plating, one can see these empty holes gaping in the metal. They are like silent witnesses to how the most advanced machine of its time fell apart, unable to withstand its death throes. Parts of this machine are scattered across the seabed, creating a vast debris field. It extends over an area of about 5 square kilometers between the bow and stern sections. Researchers are creating detailed maps of this field, tracking the position of thousands of artifacts, from giant boilers to tiny buttons. Each object on this map has its own fall trajectory, its own story, calculated according to the laws of hydrodynamics. It resembles the site of a space catastrophe, where clues frozen in the silt tell of the final minutes of a giant tearing itself apart. Among these clues are entire sections of the hull. For example, the famous Big Piece, the Big Piece. This is a fragment of the starboard hull plating, weighing about 15 tons, which was raised to the surface in 1998. Rows of portholes from first and third class cabins are visible on it, clearly demonstrating the social stratification even on this piece of wreckage. This fragment has become an invaluable material for studying the condition of the metal, the rate of corrosion, and the effects of the deep-sea environment. It is a piece of the Titanic that has returned to our world to tell the story of its destruction firsthand. The story of the destruction is particularly visible at the stern section. While the ship's bow has retained its majesty, the stern presents a picture of complete chaos. Here, the decks are compressed together like a stack of pancakes due to the pressure and the impact with the seabed. The metal is mangled and torn, and the interior spaces are almost inaccessible for exploration, having turned into a dangerous labyrinth. This is the most mysterious and tragic part of the Titanic, a vivid testament to the monstrous energy that was released when the hull broke in two. In this chaos rests the heart of the machine. Despite the horrific destruction, the giant reciprocating steam engines can be discerned in the stern section. These colossal mechanisms, several stories high, are now a mangled labyrinth of cylinders, connecting rods and pipes covered in a thick layer of rust. Once they were the heart of the Titanic. Their rhythmic beat was its pulse. Now they are silent, fallen titans, sleeping in the ruins of their own body, frozen in a final effort that could not save their home. Beside these titans lie their lungs, the enormous steam boilers. 29 gigantic boilers, each the size of a small house and weighing hundreds of tons, were torn from their mountings during the breakup. Most of them lie in the debris field, far from the main sections of the ship, resembling fallen stone idols. Their massive steel hulls are relatively well preserved, though covered in a thick layer of rust. Once, fire raged in their furnaces, turning water into steam. Now they are filled only with icy water and eternal silence. This silence also preserves the final commands. In the depths of the mangled stern, in the engine room, the telegraphs that relayed orders from the captain's bridge have survived. Unlike the bridge, which was almost completely destroyed, here, deep within the hull, they have survived much better. Their brass dials with the commands full, half, slow, stop are still clearly legible beneath a layer of silt. The pointers frozen on the last received order tell the story of the Titanic's final desperate maneuvers better than any words, serving as a silent monument to the struggle to the very end. The instruments of this struggle were the gigantic propellers. The two wing propellers cast from solid bronze are still in place, though buried deep in the seabed silt. The central steel propeller likely broke off during the descent and is hidden beneath debris or silt. The surviving bronze propellers look almost new. Their surface is only slightly tarnished, as the copper alloy is toxic to many marine organisms and bacteria. These massive blades, designed to propel the largest moving object of their time, are now forever motionless, frozen in their final turn. Also motionless is the rudder that was meant to direct this power. The enormous rudder blade, a structure weighing over 100 tons, was torn from the stern and lies separately in the debris field, like a part cast aside. Its colossal size and powerful construction are staggering to the imagination. This rudder, which they desperately tried to turn in the final seconds before the collision, is now itself a motionless piece of wreckage. It lies in the silt as a symbol of the futility of human effort in the face of an element that proved stronger and faster. Only some materials proved stronger than the elements. The bow section, despite everything, has retained its tragic majesty and has become the most recognizable image of the sunken vessel. It has plunged deep into the seabed silt, almost 20 meters, and it seems as if the ship is still continuing its final voyage, ploughing not the waters of the Atlantic, but the ocean of eternity. It is this view, the bow pointing into the abyss, that has become a silent monument to hope gone under, an icon frozen in time and space. On this bow, on the forecastle, details of the deck equipment can still be discerned. The massive anchor chains lie in their places, their links the size of a human head, and weighing 80 kilograms each. Nearby are the bits to which mooring lines were tied, and even the huge spare anchor still secured to the deck. All of this is covered in a layer of rust and silt, but the shapes remain recognizable. Here, at the very edge of the ship, passengers once stood, gazing at the horizon. Now, the view from here opens only into the impenetrable darkness of the abyss. Out of this darkness rises the foremast, or rather, what remains of it. The mast itself collapsed long ago from the impact with the bottom, but its base still stands firmly on the deck. Nearby, on the seabed, lie the remains of the crow's nest, the observation post from which lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee first spotted the iceberg and shouted the fateful words into the telephone, "Iceberg, right ahead!" Now, no one looks forward from this spot. The gaze is directed only downward, into the silt, where the wreckage of the mast rests, having become part of the general silent chaos. The chaos has not entirely consumed the captain's bridge. Although the wooden wheel and most of the navigation equipment have disappeared, eaten by microbes, the bronze pedestal on which it was mounted still stands in its place. Nearby is the engine order telegraph, through which Captain Smith gave commands to the heart of the ship. Its handles are frozen in their last position, as if the full astern command was never cancelled. This nerve centre of the giant, where fateful decisions were made, is now silent, covered in a greenish patina and marine sediment. From this silent control centre, corridors lead to the officers' quarters. In one of them, in Captain Edward Smith's cabin, his private bathroom has survived. The white enamelled bathtub is clearly visible, with its taps and pipes covered in patina. This is one of the most famous and intimate details on the entire ship. Looking at it, one can easily imagine the captain preparing for a new day. Now this tub is filled not with hot water, but with the icy silence of the ocean and a layer of silt, having become a quiet memorial to its owner. Next to the captain's quarters was the gymnasium, but almost nothing of it remains. This room on the boat deck was one of the first to be destroyed during the sinking. The roof has collapsed, and of the unique for their time exercise machines, such as the electric horse and stationary bicycles, only twisted metal frames covered in rusticles remain. A place intended for maintaining health and vigour has become one of the most vivid symbols of decay and entropy, where the only movement is the slow settling of rust. Rust also covers the davits, protruding from the sides of the ship. These are the cranes that were used to lower the lifeboats into the water. Most of them are frozen in the outward position, as if still trying to lower the last boat, of which there were never enough. They look like skeletal hands reaching into the void in an eternal, silent gesture of despair. This is one of the most poignant sights on the Titanic, a silent reproach and a reminder of the desperate shortage of seats that turned the shipwreck into a tragedy of such magnitude. The tragedy also left its mark on the famous grand staircase, or rather, on the place where it once was. The staircase itself, made of oak and adorned with intricate carvings, was completely eaten by marine organisms, leaving not a splinter behind, but the space it occupied remains. Now it is a huge gaping shaft, descending several decks deep into the ship. Looking down into it from above is like looking into a well of time, into the void where magnificence once reigned. At the bottom of this well, in the silt, rest fragments of bronze cherubs and the remains of a huge wrought-iron chandelier. Through this well of time, one can peer into the first-class dining saloon. Here, in almost complete darkness, tables and chairs, bolted to the floor, still stand. They are lined up in neat rows, as if still waiting for guests to a dinner that never took place. The wooden parts of the furniture have disappeared, but their cast-iron bases remain, creating a ghostly image of a feast interrupted forever. The light of the submersible snatches these frozen scenes from the gloom, and it seems that silent waiters are about to emerge from the darkness. On these tables and on the floor of the saloon, one can find astonishingly preserved dinnerware. Plates, cups, and saucers made of durable porcelain, bearing the emblem of the White Star Line shipping company, survived the fall to the seabed and now lie in the silt, often in whole, unbroken stacks. The white glaze with the blue logo has been almost unaffected by time and salt water. These items, created for everyday use, have acquired the status of museum exhibits, scattered throughout the largest and quietest museum in the world, where each exhibit lies in its original place. This museum also has its own wine cellar. In the debris field and in the cargo holds, intact bottles of champagne, wine, and ale are found. The strong glass and tightly sealed corks have withstood both the monstrous pressure and 100 years in cold water. Some bottles still lie in the remnants of wooden crates. It is impossible to know if the taste of the beverage has been preserved, but the very fact of their integrity is astonishing. These are sealed messages from the past, waiting for their moment in the deepest and coldest wine cellar on the planet. Alongside the wine lie more prosaic cargoes, reminders of the Titanic as a part of the global economy. The holds carried a wide variety of goods, from rolls of linoleum and jars of olives to automobile tires and even a shipment of opium for medicinal purposes. In one of the cargo holds, the outlines of a car, a rare Renault-type CB Coupe de Ville, can still be distinguished. Most of the car has decayed, but its frame, engine, and some metal parts are still there. It stands in its underwater garage, awaiting a driver who never reached the New World. This journey to the New World also carried a huge amount of mail. The Titanic held the status of a Royal Mail ship, and on board was a post office where 5 clerks sorted thousands of bags of letters and parcels. This compartment was one of the first to be flooded. All its paper correspondence has turned into a single congealed mass of cellulose, resembling wet cardboard. Not a single letter can be read. These are millions of untold stories, unexpressed confessions, and meetings that never happened, merged into a silent archive at the bottom of the Atlantic. But in this archive, music has survived. During one of the expeditions, a leather bag belonging to one of the orchestra's musicians was discovered. Inside, thanks to the anaerobic environment created by the decomposing leather, sheets of music were preserved. The paper had become as fragile as an autumn leaf, but the musical staves and cymbals could still be discerned on it. It was a hymn that the orchestra may have played in its final moments. The ink proved more durable than the paper, preserving a melody that no one will ever hear live again. Live music is now performed only by the inhabitants of the depths. Inside the hull, in the dark corners and pipes, deep-sea fish find shelter, grenadiers or rat-tails. These creatures with large, sensitive eyes and long, thin tails slowly patrol their territory like ghostly sentinels. To them, the Titanic is not a monument or a tragedy, but simply a convenient artificial reef, a large mountain with many caves where they can hide from predators and wait for prey. They are the new, silent residents of this sunken city. These ghostly fish sometimes swim into places that were once full of life and laughter. Imagine a slow-moving, dreamlike chimeras fish swimming through what was once a Turkish bath. The mosaic tiles on the bath walls are partially preserved, their bright blue-green patterns still visible under a layer of silt. In the light of a submersible, they gleam dimly, creating a surreal picture. The fish, a child of eternal darkness and cold, glides past patterns created for pleasure and warmth, completely indifferent to their former purpose. Warmth and luxury have left other traces as well. In some first-class cabins, brass and gilded elements of beds, washstands and even mirrors still survive, although their amalgam has darkened. Metals resistant to corrosion, such as brass, copper and bronze, have survived decades in salt water much better than steel. They gleam dully in the light of searchlights, reminders of the comfort that once reigned within these walls. These are small, imperishable islands of the past in an ocean of decay. On one of these islands of the past lies a gilded lamp in the shape of a cherub. It once adorned the grand staircase, but was found in the debris field far from the main hull. Despite falling from a great height, it is almost undamaged. Its small face and wings can still be discerned under a thin layer of silt. This object, a symbol of elegance and wealth, now lies in complete darkness, its gilding visible only for the brief moment a submersible's beam falls upon it. Beauty that has survived against all odds. Silent witnesses to human fates have also survived. Around the ship, in the debris field, hundreds of pairs of shoes are scattered. The leather and fabrics of clothing have long since decayed, but the tannins used to treat the leather of the shoes proved toxic to many marine microorganisms. As a result, the footwear has been preserved where the bodies of its owners once settled on the seabed. Pairs of men's boots, women's shoes, and children's boots lie on the bottom, often side by side, as if their invisible owners are still standing here, in silent expectation. Children's belongings are especially poignant. A porcelain doll's head with remnants of fair hair, a tin soldier, a small teddy bear, or rather what is left of it, have been found on the seabed. These finds are reminders of the youngest passengers, whose journey to a new life never came to be. A toy created for joy and comfort lies in absolute darkness and cold, having become a quiet symbol of an interrupted childhood. It no longer belongs to a child, it belongs to the ocean. The ocean became the master of other personal belongings as well. On the seabed, they find perfume bottles, combs, hatpins, pocket watches with frozen hands. Each such object is a tiny but incredibly powerful connection to a specific person whose life was cut short in the icy water. In some hermetically sealed leather suitcases recovered from the bottom, even paper money, documents and clothing have survived, untouched by the water. Opening such a suitcase, researchers feel as if they are opening a portal to the year 1912, a year frozen in the window frames. Most of the glass in the portholes and windows could not withstand the pressure and shockwave during the sinking. Now they are empty eye sockets, through which deep currents slowly flow. They no longer reflect the lights of the ballrooms or the faces of passengers, but only frame the eternal darkness. Passing by, the beam of a submersible snatches these neat rows of dark rectangles from the gloom, and it seems as if the ship itself is looking at you from the depths of time, its gaze empty and calm. Through these empty gazes, one can see ghostly silhouettes. Where wooden decks or decorative elements once were, voids now gape. Marine organisms that feed on cellulose ate almost all the wood within the first few decades. Only the metal frames of benches, the skeletons of doors, frames that no longer hold wood or glass, remain. This creates the effect of a negative, a photographic impression. We see not the object itself, but its absence, a contour outlined by emptiness, as if all the flesh has been stripped from a ghost ship. The flesh of the ship has become a home for new flowers. On the remnants of furniture, on the walls and ceilings inside the hull, bright white and yellow actinia, or sea anemones, have settled. They dot the surfaces like living flowers in an underwater garden where there are no strong currents. Their tentacles sway gently in the water, catching passing particles of food. These delicate creatures bring unexpected colour and life to the dead kingdom of rust and silt. They are the new inhabitants of the ballrooms, their silent and unhurried bloom. The flowering of life can also be seen on the decks. The promenade deck, intended for leisurely strolls in the open air, is now home to deep-sea sponges and corals. They attach themselves to railings and bulkheads, slowly building their calcareous and silicious skeletons. Some of them, like glass sponges, create complex and beautiful lace-like structures that are, in the light of a submersible, glow from within as if made of fiber optics. This is the art of nature, born on the ruins of human art. On these ruins, one can read words, plaques with the names of rooms, cabin numbers, instructions. Everything that was engraved on brass or bronze has survived decades underwater. Sea deck, private, notice. These short, business-like inscriptions now sound like epitaphs. They denote spaces that no longer exist, or rules that no one is left to follow. This is the official language of the ship, which continues to speak even after the ship itself has fallen silent forever. The sounds of the kitchen have also fallen silent, but its utensils remain. In the galley area, one can find copper cauldrons for making soup, pots and pans. Copper, like brass, resists corrosion well, so these items have retained their shape. They lie jumbled together, piled up during the destruction, resembling a gnome's treasure. Once, this place was bustling with activity, with thousands of meals being prepared. Now it is just a mountain of silent cookware, feasted upon only by bacteria and marine worms, the new, uninvited chefs. These worms and other organisms are gradually burying the ship. The process called bioturbation, the stirring of sediment by living creatures, slowly buries small pieces of wreckage. By churning the silt in search of food, bottom dwellers cover the artifacts with a new layer of sediment, hiding them from our view. The ocean is not just dismantling the Titanic, it is carefully covering and burying it, hiding it from prying eyes. This slow process of burial is nature's final show of respect for the fallen giant. The giant itself has changed the nature around it. A unique ecosystem has formed around the shipwreck, which differs noticeably from the surrounding abyssal plain. The hull created a hard substrate, which is so lacking on the silty seafloor, and attracted numerous organisms, from bacteria to fish. The biomass of life on and around the Titanic is tens of times greater than the density of life in adjacent areas. The ship has become a true island of life, an oasis in the cold desert of the ocean floor. This oasis also attracts large predators. Deep-sea sharks, such as the Portuguese dogfish, as well as large rays, have been spotted in the area of the Titanic. They are attracted by the abundance of fish and other organisms that have found refuge on the shipwreck. These ancient predators slowly patrol the perimeter of the sunken giant, representing the top of the food chain in this local world. A shark gliding past the first-class portholes is an image that combines the primal power of nature and the pinnacle of human technology. The pinnacle of the Titanic's technology was let down not only by the quality of its steel, but also by its design. Its watertight bulkheads, which were supposed to ensure its unsinkability, did not extend all the way to the upper decks. When water filled the first compartments, it simply began to spill over the tops of the bulkheads into the next ones, like water in an ice cube tray. Now, looking at the wrecked hull, one can see these bulkheads in cross-section, resembling giant steel ribs in a whale's skeleton. They are a monument to fatal hubris. Hubris is also evident in the absence of binoculars. In the crow's nest, from where the iceberg was first spotted, the lookouts had no binoculars. They were locked in a box, and the key had been accidentally taken by a second officer who had been transferred off the ship before it sailed. Perhaps having binoculars would have allowed them to spot the danger several tens of seconds earlier, and those seconds would have been enough to maneuver. This small, almost anecdotal fact lies at the heart of the greatest maritime tragedy, a reminder of the role of chance in history. History is also frozen in the air. In some cabins and rooms, hermetically sealed portholes have survived. Their thick glass withstood both the pressure and the impact with the bottom. Inside these windows, the air of 1912 has been preserved. These are tiny, invisible time capsules, containing the atmosphere of a bygone era, with its composition and even its smells. If it were possible to open such a porthole, we would breathe the same air that the passengers of the Titanic breathed on its first and final voyage. This air of the past contrasts with the marine snow of the present. Marine snow is a continuous, slow rain of organic debris, excrement and mucus falling from the upper sunlit layers of the ocean. It covers all surfaces of the Titanic with a thin, fluffy layer, serving as food for many bottom-dwelling organisms. The ballroom, once glittering with lights, is now illuminated only by bioluminescence. And instead of music, there is the quiet whisper of settling particles, covering the past in a white shroud. Beneath this shroud, inside the mangled stern, lie the most inaccessible rooms. These are the boiler rooms, where in hellish heat and coal dust, stokers worked, shoveling coal into the furnaces of 29 boilers. Now, they are the darkest, coldest, and most dangerous parts of the ship to explore, filled with debris. They hold the silence of those who, until the very end, maintained the steam, providing power for the radio signals and lights. Their fate is forever concealed in these steel caves. The caves of the Titanic have become home to secretive creatures. In the hull's fractures and in the mangled funnels, deep-sea octopuses, such as granulodon, find refuge. These intelligent and flexible creatures use the ruins as a complex labyrinth in which to hide from predators and make their lairs. An octopus peering out of a funnel that once carried smoke from the boiler room is a living symbol of how nature colonizes and adapts even the most grandiose of human creations for its own use. Human creations also left their inscriptions. Despite 100 years underwater and a thick layer of rust, the raised letters Titanic can still be discerned on the ship's bow. They are almost invisible, hidden under growths, and visible only from a certain angle and with the right lighting. The name that once shone proudly on its side has now become a barely noticeable ghost, a whisper that can be felt more than read. A name the ocean is trying to erase, but so far cannot. This whisper carries throughout the ship, even along its dead nerves. Along the decks and bulkheads, remnants of electrical cables covered in lead and gutta-percha insulation can still be seen. It was these materials that protected the copper wires from corrosion. Once, an electric current ran through these veins, powering thousands of light bulbs, the elevators, and the radio station. Now they are dead nerves, but their preservation is astounding. A reminder that the Titanic was a true marvel of electrification for its era. The radio room, from where the first SOS signals were sent, was also a marvel. The room itself, made of wood, is almost completely destroyed, its roof having collapsed. Only parts of the bulkheads and the copper wires leading to the antennas remain. But the very fact that we know where it was and can see its remains makes one ponder the desperate messages that flew into the night's darkness from this small room, which became the center of hope for the entire sinking world. Its silence today is more deafening than any scream. Hope faded, but it left behind an echo. The distress signals of the Titanic were among the first in history to use the new SOS code. Before that, the signal CQD was used. The Titanic's radio operators transmitted both signals, and this tragedy was largely responsible for SOS becoming the international standard. Even in its demise, the ship changed the world, making the sea a little safer for future generations. Its final message continues to save lives even today. The ship's own future is sealed. Scientists predict that due to the accelerating process of corrosion and the activity of microorganisms, The Titanic could completely disintegrate within the next 20, 30 years. The decks will collapse completely, the sides will fall away, and all that will remain of the majestic liner will be a formless pile of rust on the seabed, which will eventually dissolve entirely into the ocean. We are witnessing the final chapters in the life of this ship. It's slow fading. The final chapters are being written not only by rust, but also by human presence. Since its discovery in 1985, the Titanic has been visited by dozens of submersibles. They have left memorial plaques, artificial flowers, and even beer cans on the seabed. These modern artifacts lie alongside the century-old debris, creating another, the most recent, archaeological layer. This is a human attempt to preserve memory, but it only accelerates the destruction, disturbing the fragile peace of this underwater cemetery. The peace is disturbed with every landing of a submersible. The landing of a multi-ton vehicle on the deck can destroy fragile rusticles and buckle weakened structures. Propellers stir up clouds of silt that settle on surfaces, changing the chemical environment and either accelerating or slowing corrosion in different places. Man, who revealed the Titanic to the world, has unwittingly become one of the agents of its final descent into oblivion. Our curiosity is another form of corrosion. The descent into oblivion will leave behind only the most durable materials. The bronze letters spelling the manufacturer's name, Harland and Wolff, Belfast, on one of the engines will likely outlive the engine itself. The bronze compasses will outlive the bridge. The bronze propellers will outlive the stern. When the steel skeleton finally disintegrates, these small, noble artifacts will remain on the seabed, like the last words in a long, tragic story, having resisted decay. History is also captured in the way the ship lies. It rests at the bottom of a small underwater canyon, which it is believed to have carved itself in the soft seabed sediments during its fall and impact. The ship does not simply lie on the bottom. It has changed its geology, creating its own memorial, carved not in stone, but in millennial silt. It has become an integral part of the planet's landscape, writing itself into its geological record. The ship's particles themselves are also becoming part of the planet. The iron dissolving in the water becomes part of the marine ecosystem. It is absorbed by plankton, which in turn is eaten by fish and other organisms. The particles of the Titanic are incorporated into the global food chain, traveling throughout the world's oceans. The ship is not just disappearing, it is dissolving and being reborn in thousands of living organisms. It is becoming part of the very life of the ocean, returning to the cycle from which it was once removed. The cycle of life and death is visible in the contrast of materials. Next to decayed wood and rusting steel lie almost untouched ceramic tiles. In the first-class bathrooms and in the galley, they still retain their colour and glaze. Their geometric patterns are still clearly visible under a thin layer of silt. These are small islands of order and cleanliness amidst the chaos of destruction, reminders of humanity's aspiration for beauty and hygiene. Even in the middle of the cold ocean, the ocean is inhabited by creatures resembling flowers from another world. These are sea lilies, or crinoids, ancient animals, relatives of starfish. They attach themselves to the railings and superstructures with their stems, and unfold their crowns of feathery arms to catch food from the water. Their slow swaying in the light of a submersible creates the illusion of an underwater meadow growing on the rusty decks. A fantastical garden aboard the ghost ship. This phantom is dressed in layers of time. The decks, once washed and scrubbed to a shine, are now a complex multi-layered pie. On top is fresh marine snow. Beneath it, a layer of silt and sediment. Deeper still, a layer of corrosion products, the very rusticles. And only beneath all this lie the remains of the original steel deck. To reach the ship itself, one must break through the layers of time that the ocean has carefully applied over more than 100 years. Time has spared the funnels only in memory. The 4 enormous funnels, a symbol of the Titanic's power and speed, were its most vulnerable part. Made of thin steel, they collapsed under their own weight as the ship listed, or were torn off by the rush of water during the sinking. Only giant circular openings remain on the deck, leading into the ship's depths. These gaping holes resemble the craters of extinct volcanoes, from which thick smoke once billowed. And now only eternal cold darkness seeps. The darkness also hides the secret of the life jackets. There were enough of them on board for everyone, but many were made of cork and canvas. In the icy water, the cork quickly became waterlogged, losing its buoyancy and pulling a person under instead of keeping them afloat. Furthermore, an improperly worn life jacket could break one's neck when jumping into the water. For many, this element of rescue became the cause of death. Their remnants have likely long since decayed, but the memory of this cruel irony remains. The irony of fate is also visible in a pile of coal. A section of the double bottom, torn off during the breakup, lies in the debris field. On it still rests coal that spilled from the bunkers. This coal was meant to feed the furnaces and drive the ship forward, towards its destination, towards a new life. Now it just lies on a piece of metal at the bottom of the ocean, unused fuel for a journey that was never completed. Energy, frozen in uselessness, like untapped potential. Luxury items have also become useless. In the debris field, one finds not only the standard White Star Line porcelain, but also the personal, richly decorated and gilded dinnerware of first-class passengers. But at the bottom of the ocean, all are equal. An expensive plate lies next to a cheap bottle, and both are equally covered in silt and serve as home to the same sea creatures. The social distinctions, so important on board, have been completely erased by the indifference of the abyss. The abyss has spawned its own artists. Colonies of ophiuroids, or brittle stars resembling sea stars with thin, writhing arms, have settled on some of the hull's vertical surfaces. They crawl slowly over the rusty surfaces, collecting organic particles, leaving behind barely visible trails. Their movements are slow and graceful. They are like living, ever-changing patterns that nature paints on the body of the sleeping giant, adding a strange alien beauty to it. Beauty and ugliness are intertwined here. Next to delicate sea lilies, one can see the coarse tracks left by the caterpillars and wheels of submersibles on the silty seabed. These tracks from the Mears, Alvin, and Triton crisscross the debris field, connecting different artifacts like roads in a dead city. These scars will remain for decades, perhaps even centuries, in this calm environment. This is the chronicle of the Titanic's exploration, another historical layer imposed by man on top of the tragedy itself. The tragedy is hidden under layers of silt. The decks inside the ship are covered with a thick layer of sediment, which has slowly seeped in through breaches and open hatches. This silt, like a shroud, has covered the floors of cabins, corridors, and halls. It conceals a multitude of small artifacts, but at the same time, it preserves them, protecting them from the aggressive aquatic environment. When the beam of a submersible glides over this covering, it appears soft and serene, like freshly fallen snow in a quiet winter forest. Beneath this snow, music may be sleeping. Imagine a grand piano in the first-class dining saloon. Its wooden case was long ago consumed by microorganisms, but the heavy cast-iron frame with its taut strings could have survived. It lies somewhere under the thick layer of silt, and its strings are perhaps still taut. If one could touch them, they would produce a dull, rattling sound, a final chord that would dissolve into the silence, never reaching anyone's ears. The ears of deep-sea fish do not hear music, but they feel the slightest vibrations in the water. To them, the Titanic is an irregularity in the smooth flow of the current, creating eddies and zones of calm where they can rest or lie in wait for prey. They read the ship's architecture not with their eyes, but with their entire bodies, sensing its presence as a change in the familiar slow dance of the water that has been going on for millions of years. The ship has become part of the natural landscape for them. The dance of the water slowly destroys even the strongest elements. The propeller shaft of the center propeller, a massive steel rod over 1/2 meter in diameter, was snapped like a matchstick when the hull broke apart. The fracture point, accessible for study, clearly demonstrates the crystalline structure of the metal and the monstrous force that tore it apart. This sight is a cold and silent lesson in humility before the true power of the ocean, capable of breaking what seemed unbreakable. The power of the ocean has not been able to erase the most poignant images. One of the most famous discoveries is a pair of small children's shoes, lying side by side in the debris field. They are so well preserved that even the laces are visible. They lie as if a child had just taken them off, preparing to go to sleep, and are waiting for their owner. This image, in its simplicity and ordinariness, tells more about the tragedy than any numbers, reports, or diagrams of the destruction. The sleep into which the ship has sunk is a dreamless sleep without awakening. There is no change of day and night here, no seasons. There is only the monotonous, continuous process of decay and assimilation by nature. The Titanic has ceased to be a ship and has become a geological and biological phenomenon. It no longer belongs fully to human history. It belongs to the history of the planet, having become a part of it, like a mountain or a canyon. The planet will claim it completely, but not all at once. The last things to disappear will likely be the non-metallic artifacts, porcelain and glass. They are chemically inert and can lie on the seabed for millennia, even after no trace of the ship itself remains. Someday, future archaeologists may not find the Titanic itself, but they will find a scattering of cups with the White Star Line logo on the ocean floor, like a final echo of the great legend, like shards of a long-vanished civilization. This echo also resounds in the emptiness of the third-class cabins. Here, in the cramped quarters in the bow where the emigrants lived, almost nothing remains. The metal bunk beds stand as bare frames, but the mattresses, linens, and modest personal belongings have all vanished, dissolved without a trace. Only the bare walls and an oppressive sense of emptiness are left. These were rooms full of hopes for a new life in America. Now they are just empty boxes at the bottom of the ocean, filled only with cold, salty water. The cold water has become a canvas for nature. The rate of the Titanic's corrosion is uneven. In some places, the steel has almost completely turned to dust. In others, it is still strong. This depends on the composition of the alloy, its proximity to other metals, which creates galvanic couples, and the activity of bacterial colonies. As a result, the hull of the Titanic is a living mosaic of sections in varying states of decay. It is melting like an iceberg in warm water, but it melts in bizarre patterns, creating an ever-changing landscape. The patterns on its body are constantly changing. It is predicted that the roof over the officers' cabins and the famous crow's nest on the foremast will be among the first to collapse. Then the decks will begin to cave in one after another, like dominoes, until the bow section turns into a shapeless pile of metal, similar to the stern. It will not be an explosion, but a slow, tired settling, as if a giant is finally lying down to rest after a long watch. Mirrors have also become guardians of memory. In the first-class cabins, mirrors mounted on the walls or in wardrobes have survived. Their silver amalgam has darkened, but they still reflect, albeit dimly. When the beam of a submersible falls on such a mirror, it reflects, and for a moment it seems that something has flashed in the depths of the room, that someone is there. But it is only the reflection of our own light, returned to us from the abyss of the past, from the looking-glass of time, where reflections outlive their originals, and time flows differently here. It is estimated that the ship's rate of decay is about 100 kilograms of iron per day. 100 kilograms of the great liner turn into oxides and dissolve in the water each day, carried away by the currents. It is like a slow but relentless bleeding that cannot be stopped. The ship is literally bleeding itself out, returning to the inorganic world from which it was born, molecule by molecule. The birth of new life is happening right on its wounds. The metal-eating bacteria create a chemical plume of iron ions that drifts with the current. Other microorganisms, chemosynthesizers, use these chemicals for their life processes, forming the basis of a unique food chain independent of sunlight. The Titanic is not just a physical object. It is changing the chemical composition of the ocean in its microregion, creating conditions for life that could not exist here without it. The existence of this life has become a subject of science. The Titanic has turned into an unwitting long-term laboratory for the study of corrosion, biology, and the geology of deep-sea zones. By studying its decay, scientists obtain data on how other sunken objects will behave, including modern ships, oil platforms, and submarines. Its slow death gives us invaluable information for understanding the future of the seabed. It is not dying in vain. Only some hopes proved to be in vain. The steel frame from the enormous glass dome that once crowned the grand staircase lies at the bottom of the staircase shaft, mangled but recognizable. Daylight once poured through it, illuminating the carved oak panels. Now, only darkness seeps through its latticework, and white sea anemones grow on the metal like ghostly flowers on the trellis of an abandoned underwater garden. This light will never return. This garden also has its silent inhabitants. Small eel-like fish called lycodes often swim inside the hull. They can be seen hovering in the darkness of the cabins like phantom occupants. They peer into mirrors coated with silt and swim where beds once stood and people once sat. They are the new silent masters of the Titanic, who do not know its history and simply live within its walls, in this most unusual house on the planet. These walls are becoming increasingly fragile. Microbes are not just eating the ship from the outside. they have penetrated the microcracks and pores of the metal, destroying it from within. It is like osteoporosis, a bone disease where the structure loses density and becomes brittle. The Titanic's hull is losing its strength not only on the surface, but throughout its entire thickness. It is becoming as fragile as an old bone, ready to crumble at the slightest touch of time or a careless movement. Time has almost erased the steel partitions between the cabins, but invisible boundaries remain. Fish and other marine life often behave as if the walls are still in place. They demarcate their territories according to the long-vanished layout, avoiding invisible obstacles. The phantom walls of the cabins continue to exist in the behavior of the ship's new inhabitants, who remember what they have never seen, reading the subtle changes in the currents and the chemical composition of the water. One can only see what remains of the former luxury. In the first-class smoking room, the brass window frames and the remnants of a fireplace, faced with elegantly patterned tiles, have survived. The walnut wood panels that line the room have disappeared, but in their place remain rows of brass screws that fastened them. These small, shiny dots on the rusted bulkhead create a ghostly pattern, tracing the contours of the vanished luxury. Like a starry sky on the wall of a sunken palace, this palace, now a reef, continues its final and longest voyage, a voyage through time towards complete dissolution. It is drifting towards a state where all that will remain of it is a rust stain on the ocean floor and a slight elevation on the silty bottom, which currents will eventually smooth over. And also a legend that will prove to be stronger than steel. The physical body of the ship will disappear, but its story, its image and its name will live on in our culture, perhaps forever, as eternal as the ocean itself. Thus, at a depth of almost 4 kilometers, in absolute silence and cold, the Titanic continues its existence. It is no longer a ship, but a part of the ocean. It slowly gives itself to the water, becoming a home for new life, food for bacteria, a silent witness to the inexorable flow of time. Its story is no longer one of disaster, but a quiet, meditative poem about the return of a human creation to the bosom of nature. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. And now, just breathe. Let your eyes grow heavy, and let the quiet shadows of the Titanic lull your thoughts. Good night.